Welcome to Make Something Happen, episode 11. I'm just moving my chair around so I can sit in front of the computer. Wonderful. This is a big one. This is going to be quite complicated with lots of steps, which is great. But the end point is awesome. You get to put your own page on the internet for anybody in the world to access. And that, I think, is incredibly powerful. You can make a program and you can tell grandma about it and give her the address, and she can go and find it, and she can view it on her phone or a tablet or a PC or whatever, because the thing will be out there for the whole world to see. Excuse me, which is really, really powerful. And we start with GitHub. Remember GitHub? It's that thing you will have joined. If you haven't joined GitHub, I'm afraid you can watch, but you can't take part because you do need a GitHub username to actually put repositories in the cloud. So if you followed the procedure in Make Something Happen to get yourself on GitHub, that's fine. Log in to GitHub and go to their homepage. I'm logged in as the demo username we created way back. I'm called Begin to Code Cloud Demo, and I'm in, and I'm shiny, and I'm new, and I haven't got any repositories. Now, the first thing we need to do is make a repository, and there's a button on the home page there, which is big and large and green and inviting. So let's press that and see what happens. This is going to actually start the process. Now, a repository is a place you can put stuff. It has a name and it has a structure, which is just basically a file tree. And the starting point of that name will always be your GitHub username. So we're logged in as Begin to Code Cloud Demo. And so that's what the starting point of the address the page we're going to create will be. Now you can change this. There are ways you can actually map domains that you own onto repositories you are sharing via GitHub, but we'll do that. That's a bit beyond the scope of this session. We'll do that a bit later. So let's have a look, and I'm going to call this one clock because we're going to put the clock code out there. Now, it's telling me that's okay because it won't clash. This is basically going to be my repository. And because I'm going to make it into a web page, I have to put an IO on the end, clock.io, which is a special. You can create lots of repositories in your GitHub account, but one of them is special in that it can be made into a shareable website. That's the one that has .io on the end of the repository name. Okay, so you make one of these. The rest of it's just files you want to share. And stuff you want to actually work with other people on. This one is your home page, if you like. And I can go, I'll just call it demo clock site. I'm going to make it public because I should do. The README file is important. That's a file which you can use to tell people about it. It's less important if you're making a website, which we are at the moment, so we can leave it there. Gitignore we'll cover a little bit later. Gitignore is a way you can say, don't put these files into the repository online, please. So any file that ends .secret, has the language code secret, please don't put that out there for anyone to see. This is a way you can split off parts of your project as being confidential and held on your machine only, and other parts as visible to the rest of the world. Later in the course, in chapters 8 and 12, we'll look at ways in which we can use this facility to actually keep us secure. Stop us putting passwords into our web pages and things that we put on the repositories. So that's kind of important, but for now we don't need it. The license, you can make things available for other people to use, should you wish to do that. My feeling is that once it's on the internet, once it's been put out there on a public site, it is free for anyone to use. You can't really stop them. But if you want to have a formal way in which you can hand over permissions on things that you make, then that's what the license thing does. Otherwise, we're going to be, little warning there, we're making a public repository in our personal account. So we'll click Create Repository. There will be a rattling noise. GitHub will now go off and actually make the thing. Now, at this point, it's there. It's visible. Other people can go and take a look at it. But what we want to do is use Visual Studio Code to make it work. And that means we have to do a little bit more work to actually get that happening. And so the first thing we have to do is figure out, okay, how we're going to actually get this onto my machine. Well, I can now go into here and I can go File, and we'll close the one we're working on now, which is all my example one. So we'll go Close Folder. and then everything will go back to being empty. There we are. If you've just started code up, it'll be empty already. Now I can go into, remember the repositories here? I can go into here and I can go clone repository. Okay. And I can say clone from GitHub. And what we'll do this time is we'll do clone from GitHub. And the reason I'm doing that is I want Visual Studio Code to authenticate with GitHub. I want this to properly log in, because if I do that, then I can actually push things backwards and forwards from this program to GitHub in the cloud. So I'm going to hit clone from GitHub. And it says, okay, I want you to sign in. That's fine. We're going to hit allow. So what's going to happen now is we'll have to go through a login process, which will involve GitHub authorizing this app. Now it's quite neat, because what's going to happen is that because my browser's logged in and Visual Studio Code can talk to my browser, it'll go, okay, I'll just do it. So with a bit of luck, this will just work. Here we go. So now this will, if I do that now, it'll say, okay, I'm going to let your Visual Code, I need to know the password. Now, at this point, we'll have to pause for a second or two while Robert goes off and finds the password, which is very hard to remember because it's a good password. So I will be back in a second with the password, and we're back. I've typed the password in. Now, if I'd been a clever person, I would have had that in the paste buffer, so I would just paste it in, but I'm not that clever, it turns out. So now I can just hit confirm. And there'll be a rattling noise, and it says, okay, that's fine. We will allow the page to do that. So we'll just say open. That's okay. We're allowed to do that. So now there'll be a rattling noise again. And yes, we'll allow it to open the URL. That's absolutely fine. We're all good. And so when I've done this, it has made Visual Studio Code, part of the GitHub thing. And so now it knows what repositories I've got. And it knows I've got one called demo clock site. So if I click on that, Visual Studio will ask me whereabouts I want to put my repository that I'm downloading from GitHub. So I'll put it on the desktop. Not the best place, but it does work. Hit that, and then away we go. Yes, I'll open it, please. Let's have a look. At the moment, the repository is empty. I want to put some files in there, please. So one way to do this is to copy some from an existing clock. So I will do that. This is my desktop with the two folders. If I go into here, I can drift into the code folder that contains all the code, and then I can drift down into the chapter 2. I can go into working clock, and I'll go pick all these files up and copy them. Control A to pick them all up in a folder, Control C to copy them. Now let's go back to my original folder. Here we go, the desktop, and we're going to clock.io, and we'll go Control V. And that will paste them all in there. So now if you have a look, suddenly, as though by magic, we have a bunch of files which we've got in here, and we've got the fav icon, we've got the index.html, and we've got the style sheet, and they're all here and good to go. And I can save these to my repository, and at that point I can then start thinking about making them available on the internet, which is wonderful. But before I do any of that, I need to tell the Git installation on my system the username and the email address that links me to Git. And I do this from the command prompt. If I hit right click onto the start button and then open up Windows PowerShell, because it sounds awesome, I have to type in two commands, and here they are. I've typed them in already, but I can show you them. The first one sets the git configure global user email to the email address I used when I created my GitHub account, and I can do that. And the second command sets the username to the username I used to create the GitHub account. And so just drop onto the PowerShell, do those two things, and then we can exit from the PowerShell. We can get rid of that, and we can now go back to the source control thing, and we can check in our changes. So I'm going to go first clock, can't type today, clock site. Now this is actually just the a comment that tells me about this particular commit. I want to put all these pages, all these files in which have appeared, and so I just click the commit button, and now I get asked, okay, the very first time you do this, you have to basically say yes, okay, stage all my changes and commit them. So I just say yes, and then there'll be a rattling noise. They will now be committed to GitHub, which is fine. And what I have now is a new copy of the repository on my machine, which contains the changes that I've just entered. Now, this is just on my machine. It's not in the cloud yet. So I have to go into here, pull down this menu and explicitly select push, which says push everything on this machine up into the cloud. And if I do that, there'll now be a little bit of progress on the system, and you'll see that my little progress bar is going. And what's happening now is that all the changes that I've made on my machine are being placed in the cloud. It wants me to sign in with my browser. I can do that. So this is a pushing thing. So you do this once and then we'll be in business. So now the browser wants to help. So we'll let the browser help. Authorize. Yes. In we go. These things happen because we don't want anybody in the world to be able to suddenly push things into your repositories and whatnot. So the very first time you do this with a new on a new machine, you'll have to set up all these links. But once you've done it, then you should be in business. Now, if we go back to our repository on the page and we refresh it, we'll see that we've now got some new stuff there. The files that we wanted to place in the repository have now been placed in the cloud, which is wonderful. Okay, time for a recap. What we've done is we've taken a bunch of files from GitHub, put them into the sample code for this book. We've then created our own repository, which we've cloned onto our machine, so we have a copy of it. We've then added some files from my repository, if you like, and placed them in your repository, and then we've pushed that repository back up into GitHub. So we now have a copy of those files in the cloud. Anyone with this link can go and get the files you've just placed up there. So as a way of sharing files, it's wonderful, but we don't want to do that. We want to actually have this as a web page anyone can visit, and to change the settings of a repository to make it a web page. I've just realized I spelled clock incorrectly. That's been there all the time and nobody told me. Okay, well, in that case, then we're going to have to call it this name and just live with that, I think, because I can't redo the video. Life's too short. So it's CLCOK. I now have to go down here. I've pressed the settings for my repository. I want to go down here. Oh, I can rename it. Oh, I'll do that. There's always an answer to a problem. I'm going to rename it clock. Whether I'll actually put it back to the wrong one at some later stage, you will never know. We'll see. The great thing about making videos, if I hit rename, it'll rename it, is that actually, yeah, so now it's called clock. I much prefer that. So now we can go back to settings and we can go down to pages and we can effectively tell the GitHub system to service this as a page. Deploy from a branch, that's fine. I want to deploy from the main branch because that's the only one we have at the moment. What you can do with GitHub is you can make different branches that have different versions of your program or different people working on them. It's terribly, terribly powerful. And so I do that and I hit save. And there'll now be a bit of configuration going on. And you can use a tool called Jekyll, which is a tool for making static web pages from source code. It's very, very nice. It runs on your PC and makes a website which has got all the things you would expect a website to have. All we're going to do is actually put our web pages, our repository on as a just a static bunch of documents, but you can actually give them a bit more flavor and personality, and Jekyll's a really good tool for doing that. So we've got all this. And so now we've actually got our pages being made ready for deployment. You can, if you wish, have a custom domain, which is quite a powerful feature. But we should now be, I think, if I'm correct, have a deployed site. Your site is live at begin-to-code demo.github.io clock.io. Will this work? Well, I can hardly wait. I'm going to press the button to see if, oh, there's the clock. And up it comes. So this is now, I shouldn't sound so surprised, but there you are. This is actually being hosted in the cloud. You can tell anybody in the world to go there and they will see your ticking clock and so it all just works. So we've actually made the site, we've put it on the cloud, and now anybody can go there. I'm quite relieved that worked, and I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much, and I'm going to go and have a lie down now.